To set up your Bluetooth dimmer, connect it to your luminaire. With the SANlight Evo series, the dimmer slot and the dimmer are marked blue. Now open the SANlight Mesh app and click on Add Device. The app will now ask for authorization for Bluetooth communication. Press Next and confirm the permissions for GPS and Bluetooth. For the GPS authorization, it's sufficient to choose when using the app. The GPS authorization is required by the Android operating system. No data is stored via the SANlight Mesh app. The Bluetooth dimmers indicate that they are ready for integration into your mesh by the orange LED lighting up and the green LED flashing. In the SANlight Mesh app, you can now integrate your dimmers via the Add Device button. All available dimmers are displayed. Now select them and press Add to Mesh. This may take a few minutes. As soon as the Bluetooth dimmers are connected to the Mesh app, the green and orange LEDs on the Bluetooth dimmers light up continuously. You can now see all your connected luminaires in the Mesh overview. Here you have the option of controlling the entire mesh, that is, dimming all the luminaires at the same time, or each luminaire individually. The lock function protects against unintentional adjustment of the dimming setting. To dim your luminaires, unlock the lock button. Now you can change the dimming settings via the slider. By pressing +1 or -1, you can dim in 1% steps. The mesh slider dims all the luminaires in your mesh. You can use the sliders in the device overview to dim each luminaire individually. To get a better overview of your luminaires, you can rename them in the menu under the Devices tab. By dimming the luminaires, you can see which luminaire is which. In our example, we have two Evo 3 100 in a 100 by 100 cm setup and one Evo 4 80 in a 80 by 80 cm setup. Now we can also group our luminaires in the menu under the tab Groups. By pressing the Add Group button, we create our groups. A group for the 100 by 100 setup and also a group for the 80 by 80 setup. With a swipe to the right, we can edit or delete the groups. Let's go to Edit here. Now we can assign a color to this group to better tell them apart. By clicking on Add Device, we can add luminaires to the group. In this case, both Evo 3 100. Now the same again for the 80 by 80 setup. Here we add the Evo 480. If we now go back to the mesh overview, we see our two groups. Of course, we can also dim the luminaires in these groups individually, or the entire group together. The latest feature in the SANlight Mesh app is the Daylight Cycle function. We find this in the menu under the Daylight Cycle tab. Here we create a new daylight cycle using the Add Daylight Cycle button. We can edit this again by swiping to the right. Let's first make the daylight cycle for the 100 by 100 cm setup. Using the curve field, we can now define the intensities and the duration of the lighting. To guarantee the longevity and efficiency of our LED chips and driver, the luminaires switch off below 20% dimming power. The starting point of the daylight cycle, the hour 0 in the curve field, is always the moment when the luminaires and the Bluetooth dimmer receive power. As an example, I now set the sunrise where we go from 0% to 100% within 1 hour. If we want to set an additional point, press and hold a position on the time axis. We can simply move the points by dragging or set the exact duration using the rotary wheel. Important: this is not a time, but a duration. To edit individual points in the curve field, simply press the point and edit the setting. If we are satisfied with the daylight cycle, We can confirm it by clicking on the green mark and return to the daylight cycle overview by clicking on the arrow at the top left. Under the Daylight Assignment tab, we can now assign a daylight cycle to the respective luminaires. Let's also create a daylight cycle for the 80 by 80 cm setup. We confirm this again and assign it to the Evo 480. Let's now go back to the mesh overview. Here we see how the different daylight cycles are applied to the mesh. The green bar shows in which phase the daylight cycle currently is. If we now change the dimming level, we see that the daylight cycle always adapts to the selected intensity. Of course, you can still control all the luminaires in the groups individually. Important information: even though the daylight cycle could replace a timer, we strongly recommend using a timer. If there is a power failure or similar during the dark phase, the Bluetooth dimmer behaves as if the new cycle begins and it starts anew with the daylight cycle or the last set dimming level. This possibility is eliminated by using a timer. Another function is the stealth mode. Here, by tapping the dimmer with the white side of the magnetic key, we can make the dimmer invisible to other Bluetooth devices. The Bluetooth dimmer confirms this by lighting up the orange LED, which then starts to flash. Please note that you must always leave one Bluetooth dimmer from your mesh visible. Only then can you continue to control all your luminaires via the SANlight Mesh app. By tapping again with the magnetic key, the dimmer is visible again for Bluetooth devices. In rare cases, it may be necessary to reset your Bluetooth dimmer. For example, if you lose your Android device. To do this, tap the Bluetooth dimmer with the red side of the magnetic key for at least 5 seconds. The luminaire goes off, the red LED on the dimmer lights up, and by flashing all LEDs, the dimmer confirms that it is reset. The luminaire switches on again. After resetting, the Bluetooth dimmer is removed from the Mesh app. It can now be integrated into a mesh again via the app.